Imagine, thousands of years ago, there's a water source near your village. It looks clean. People drink it every day. Then one day, people start getting sick. One by one. Some don't survive. No one knows why. The water looked fine, didn't it? Now imagine you're there. Would you still drink it? Ancient humans faced this danger constantly, never knowing what was hiding inside their water. But then, someone noticed something strange. Water that had been sitting near fire seemed safer. Stay with me until the end, because that one accidental observation changed the way humans survive forever. Today, we know exactly what's dangerous and dirty. Water, bacteria, parasites, viruses, things so small. No human eye could ever see them. But for most of human history, none of that existed as an idea. There was no concept of germs, no microscopes, no science of disease. All people knew was this. Sometimes, water made you sick, and sometimes it didn't. And there was no way to tell which was which just by looking. A river could look perfectly clear and still be filled with waste from animals upstream, or from the very village drinking it. A still pond could look peaceful and be breeding disease with every passing day. This wasn't a rare problem. For early humans, contaminated water was one of the biggest silent killers in existence, right alongside starvation, predators, and warfare. Entire families could be wiped out in days. Entire villages could be weakened just when they needed strength the most, during a harsh season or a conflict with a rival tribe. And the cruelest part? The people who got sick had done everything right. They drank from the same source their parents drank from, the same source that had kept the village alive for generations. There was no warning sign, no smell, no taste, just illness arriving like a curse from nowhere. So how do you defend yourself against an enemy you cannot see, cannot predict, and cannot explain? The answer wouldn't come from understanding the enemy. It would come from accident. Here's something important to understand about early humans. They were master observers. They didn't have science, but they had something almost as powerful: pattern recognition built from thousands of years of survival. Fire had already become central to daily life. It cooked meat. It kept predators away. It provided warmth. And at some point, in some village, someone noticed a pattern that had nothing to do with any of that. Water that had been boiled for cooking, used to soften grains, or make a broth, seemed to cause less sickness than water taken straight from the river. At first, this wouldn't have been a scientific conclusion. It would have been a suspicion, a "we've noticed" kind of knowledge passed between mothers, elders, healers. Maybe it started with soup. Someone boiling water to cook meat or vegetables, and using the leftover liquid to drink, because water was too precious to waste. And over time, families who did this seemed to get sick less often than families who drank untreated water straight from the source. There was no understanding of why. No one knew that heat was killing microscopic organisms. They just knew boiled water seems safer. And when something works, even without an explanation, humans tend to hold on to it, especially when the alternative is watching people die. This is one of the most remarkable things about early human survival. They didn't need to understand the mechanism to use the solution. They trusted the pattern. And that trust, passed down generation after generation, may have saved more lives than almost any other single practice in early human history. This wasn't a single invention in a single place. It appears again and again, independently, across cultures that had no contact with each other, which tells us something important. This wasn't luck. It was humans everywhere solving the same problem in the same logical way. In ancient India, texts believed to be thousands of years old advised purifying water by boiling it, or by heating it and exposing it to sunlight before drinking. Physicians in the region understood, even without modern microbiology, that treated water led to fewer illnesses. In ancient Egypt, medical papyri describe methods of treating water for medicinal and drinking purposes, including boiling and filtering through cloth or sand. Greek physicians, including those in the tradition of Hippocrates, recommended boiling water for the sick, believing it purified the liquid and made it gentler on the body. Chinese medical traditions, going back thousands of years, strongly encouraged drinking hot or boiled water rather than cold. Untreated water, a cultural habit that, remarkably, still persists in parts of China today. Think about that for a moment. Cultures separated by oceans and mountains, with no way to communicate with each other, independently arrived at the exact same solution. Heat kills whatever makes water dangerous. That's not coincidence. That's humanity, again and again, running the same experiment: trial, death, observation, adaptation, and arriving at truth through pure survival instinct. Now here's where it gets fascinating, because ancient people had no idea why boiling worked. They just knew that it did. We now understand the real reason. Disease-causing organisms, bacteria, parasites, certain viruses are, for the most part, fragile things. Their proteins and structures can only survive within a fairly narrow temperature range. Once water reaches a rolling boil, that heat breaks down and destroys the vast majority of these organisms within moments. It doesn't remove chemical pollutants. It doesn't remove certain heavy metals. But for the biological threats, the ones causing the deadly stomach illnesses, the dysentery, the cholera-like symptoms that could wipe out a village, heat was, and still is, one of the most effective tools available. What's remarkable is that ancient people discovered a genuinely correct scientific principle thousands of years before they had any concept of microorganisms. Germ theory wasn't formally established until the 1800s, but the practice of boiling water for safety predates that scientific understanding by thousands of years. In other words, humans found the right answer long before they understood the question. That's not just impressive. That's a reminder of how powerful observation and pattern recognition can be, even without formal science behind it. Once boiling water became a common practice, the effects rippled outward in ways that shaped the future of human civilization. Fewer people died from waterborne illness, especially children and the elderly, who were always the most vulnerable. That meant populations could grow steadier and stronger, rather than being repeatedly thinned out by outbreaks. Villages could settle more permanently near water sources that might have otherwise been considered too risky, because they now had a way to make that water safer. This mattered enormously for early agriculture, which depended on staying near rivers and lakes. Armies and travelers could move further from home because they weren't as dependent on finding a trusted water source. They could treat water along the way instead of hoping the next river was safe. And, perhaps most importantly, this discovery planted an early seed of something bigger: the idea that humans could act on the environment to protect themselves, rather than simply accepting whatever nature handed them. That mindset: observe a danger, find a method, apply it, pass it down, would go on to define almost every major advance in human survival that followed. Centuries later, this same basic principle would echo forward into public health as we know it today. When cholera outbreaks devastated cities in the 1800s, and scientists finally proved the connection between contaminated water and disease, boiling water became one of the first officially recommended defenses, a scientific confirmation of something people had already been quietly doing correctly for thousands of years. Even now, in the middle of a global pandemic-conscious world, with all our filtration systems and purification tablets and UV treatments, boiling remains one of the single most reliable emergency methods for making water safe. Hikers use it. Disaster relief teams use it. Communities without access to clean infrastructure still rely on it today. Think about that. A discovery made by accident, by people with no science, no instruments, and no understanding of biology, is still one of the top recommendations for modern health organizations during emergencies. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the discovery itself. It's what it represents. Ancient humans didn't need laboratories. They didn't need microscopes or textbooks. What they had was observation, patience, and the willingness to repeat what worked, even without knowing why it worked. They turned an invisible, unexplainable killer into something they could defend against. And in doing so, they didn't just save individual lives. They changed the entire trajectory of human Survival, allowing villages to grow into towns, and towns to grow into the civilizations we're descended from today. The next time you boil a kettle or watch water bubble on a stove, remember, you're repeating an act older than written history itself, an act discovered by people who had no idea what a bacteria was, but somehow figured out exactly how to defeat it. If you found this story fascinating, let me know in the comments and subscribe, because there are so many more forgotten discoveries like this one that quietly shaped the entire course of human history.